If you ever hear something breathing behind you in the forbidden woods, don't turn around, because whatever finds you first is never the worst thing waiting there. The forest swallowed sound like it had secrets to keep, and tonight the air felt heavier than usual, thick enough that every breath Aaron took seemed to drag against his chest. He adjusted the worn strap of his basket and stepped carefully over a fallen branch, eyes scanning the shadows between the trees, because this part of the forest didn't forgive mistakes, not for someone like him, not for someone who didn't belong anywhere else. A low growl cut through the silence, so sudden and deep it froze him in place before his mind could catch up, his fingers tightening around the bundle of herbs as he slowly turned his head, just enough to catch the shape moving between the trees. Large, deliberate, watching, his heartbeat spiked, loud enough he was sure it could be heard, and he took one step back, then another, careful, quiet, but the creature matched him, unhurried, confident, like it already knew how this would end. Not here, Aaron whispered under his breath, more instinct than thought, but his heel caught against a root, and the ground came up too fast, the basket slipping from his grip as he hit the dirt, breath knocked out of him in a sharp gasp. The growl deepened, closer now, the scent of wild earth and something sharper filling the air until it drowned out everything else. For a split second, Aaron thought, "This is it." Then something changed. The air shifted, not with sound but with presence, a sudden, clean force cutting through the heaviness like a blade through fog, sharp, controlled, unmistakably alpha. The creature lunged, but it never reached him. A figure moved faster than his eyes could track, intercepting the space between them with a precision that felt practiced, effortless, the impact sending leaves scattering without ever turning chaotic, just a brief, contained clash of power and instinct that ended as quickly as it began. Silence fell again, thicker than before, but different now, like the forest itself was watching. Aaron pushed himself up, on his elbows, chest still tight, and saw him, tall, steady, framed in moonlight, shoulders squared like he'd always stood in the center of danger and never once questioned it. The stranger didn't turn right away, his attention fixed forward for a second longer, as if confirming the threat was truly gone. And when he finally looked back, the sharp lines of his face came into focus, composed, controlled, with eyes that assessed before they softened even slightly. Even without trying, the Alpha's presence pressed outward, a quiet dominance that would have made most Omegas instinctively lower their gaze. But Aaron didn't look away, not because he was fearless, but because something about this moment refused to let him. "You're going to stay on the ground," the Alpha said, voice low and even. "Or are you planning to get up?" Aaron blinked, the tension in his chest loosening just enough for him to push himself upright, brushing dirt from his sleeves in a motion that felt more automatic than steady. "You're injured," he said instead, because it was easier than answering. The Alpha glanced down briefly, like the blood at his side was an inconvenience rather than a concern, but Aaron had already stepped closer, drawn by instinct stronger than caution, close enough to catch the scent beneath the iron edge, cool, sharp, like winter air before snow, grounding in a way that made his pulse slow despite everything. "Sit," Aaron said, the word leaving him before he could reconsider, and for a moment he expected resistance. But the Alpha simply studied him, then lowered himself against the nearest tree with a controlled exhale that sounded like he'd been holding it longer than he wanted to admit. Aaron knelt beside him, hands steady now as he pressed cloth to the wound, murmuring softly under his breath, the words, quiet and unfamiliar, more feeling than language. And as the faint glow spread beneath his fingers, the Alpha's gaze sharpened, focused entirely on him. "That's not normal," the Alpha said, not accusing, just certain. Aaron didn't look up. "Neither is surviving out here alone," he replied, adjusting the pressure until the bleeding slowed, until the tension in the Alpha's shoulders eased by a fraction. The glow faded, leaving only the faintest trace behind, and the Alpha shifted, testing the injury with a small movement, then looked back at Aaron with a different kind of attention now, something quieter, more deliberate. "You live out here?" he asked. Aaron gathered the scattered herbs, placing them back into the basket with careful hands. "It's quieter," he said, and that was all. Somewhere in the distance, faint voices drifted at the edge of hearing, and Aaron's expression tightened just slightly before, smoothing over again. "They don't come this far," he added, almost to himself. "Who?" the Alpha asked. Aaron hesitated, then gave a small, distant smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "People who think they understand everything," he said, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The forest settled around them, no longer tense, but not entirely calm either, like it was aware something had shifted. The Alpha studied him again, longer this time, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter, but more certain. "Come with me," he said, as if the decision had already been made. "This place isn't safe." Aaron shook his head immediately, stepping back just enough to put space between them. "It's the only place that is," he replied, and the certainty in his tone left no room for argument. For a second, the Alpha looked like he might push further, but instead he just watched him, something unreadable passing through his expression. Aaron turned, adjusting the basket over his shoulder, and started toward the faint outline of his cabin deeper in the trees, his steps steady now even if his heartbeat hadn't fully settled. He didn't look back, but he could feel it. The weight of the Alpha's gaze, constant, unbroken, like something had already begun that neither of them fully understood. Behind him, there was a brief pause, the sound of movement as the Alpha pushed himself to his feet, slower than before but deliberate. And then, after just long enough to be a choice, footsteps followed, not close enough to crowd him, not far enough to leave. Aaron didn't stop. The door closed with a soft, final sound that seemed louder than it should have, sealing the cabin away from the forest, and for a brief second neither of them moved, as if both were aware something had just shifted but neither was willing to name it. Cale stood just inside, his presence filling the space in a way that made the small room feel even smaller, not oppressive, just impossible to ignore, and Aaron exhaled quietly before setting his basket down and turning back to his work, fingers moving with practiced ease even if his thoughts were anything but steady. "You can still leave," Aaron said without looking at him, his tone calm but not distant, as if he had already said it enough times to know it would not change anything. Cale did not answer right away, his gaze moving across the room instead, taking in the worn table, the stacked herbs, the small details that spoke of a life built carefully and alone, and then finally settling back on Aaron. "If I was going to leave, I would have," he said, voice low and certain, and there was no hesitation in it this time. Aaron's hands paused just long enough to acknowledge the answer before continuing, but something in his shoulders tightened, just slightly. "Then you are choosing the wrong place to stay," he replied. Cale stepped further in, slow, deliberate, the wooden floor creaking under his weight as he closed the distance between them by a few feet, enough to shift the air again, enough for the subtle warmth in Aaron's scent to become clearer, not overwhelming, just present, like something that had always been there waiting to be noticed. Cale inhaled once, without meaning to, then stilled, the reaction unexpected enough to register, and that alone was enough to make his gaze sharpen. Aaron noticed, of course he did, his fingers tightening around the cloth before he forced them to relax. "Sit," Aaron said, softer this time, but more firm, and Cale obeyed again, lowering himself into the chair without argument, as if the command had settled somewhere deeper than simple instruction. The silence stretched for a moment, filled only by the quiet sounds of Aaron working, the brush of fabric, the faint clink of glass, the steady rhythm of breathing that, without either of them noticing when it began, started to fall into sync. Cale leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees, watching Aaron with a focus that did not waver, and after a few seconds, he spoke. "You were not afraid," he said. Aaron did not look up. "Of what?" he asked. "Of me," Cale answered, and this time Aaron paused fully, lifting his gaze to meet his, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "Should I have been?" Aaron asked quietly. Cale held his gaze, unblinking. "Most would be," he said. Aaron considered that, then gave the smallest shake of his head. "Most people decide what you are before they ever meet you," he replied. "I prefer to see for myself." The words settled into the space between them, heavier than they should have been, and Cale found himself without an immediate response, which was unusual. Outside, the wind shifted again, carrying distant voices faintly through the trees, and this time, it was clear enough that both of them heard it. Aaron's expression changed instantly, not fear, but alertness, his body going still in a way that spoke of habit rather than surprise. Cale noticed, rising to his feet in one smooth motion despite the lingering ache in his side, his posture shifting into something sharper, more guarded. "They are closer than before," he said. Aaron moved to the window, pushing the curtain aside just enough to glance out, then letting it fall back into place. They do not usually come this far, he said, though the certainty in his voice had thinned. Cale stepped toward the door, his presence steady, controlled, like the forest outside no longer held any authority over the situation. And when he reached for the handle, Aaron spoke again. "Do not," he said, the word sharper than anything he had said so far. Cale paused, glancing back at him. "If they see you, they will not leave," Aaron added, quieter now, but no less firm. Cale studied him for a long moment, then released the handle, turning back fully. "Then they will not come in," he said simply. Aaron let out a breath that was almost a laugh, but without humor. "You do not understand," he said. Cale stepped closer again, stopping just within reach this time, the distance between them small enough that the shift in pheromones was no longer subtle. The air, warmer, steadier, like something was aligning without permission. "Then explain it to me," Cale said. Aaron hesitated, his gaze dropping briefly before lifting again, and for a moment, there was something almost tired in his expression. "To them, I am a problem that needs to be removed," he said quietly. "And anything that stands with me becomes the same." Cale's jaw tightened slightly, not with anger, but with decision, something firm settling into place. "Then they have chosen poorly," he said. The words were simple, but the certainty behind them made something in Aaron's chest shift, unexpected and unwelcome. "You do not even know who I am," Aaron said. Cale's gaze did not waver. "I know enough," he replied. Outside, a branch snapped somewhere in the distance, closer now, and this time the silence that followed was sharper, more immediate. Aaron took a step back, instinctively creating space, but Cale did the opposite, closing it, his presence grounding instead of overwhelming, his scent cutting clean through the tension in the air. "Stay behind me," Cale said, not looking away from the door. Aaron opened his mouth to argue, then stopped, the words catching before they formed, because for reasons he did not fully understand, the command did not feel like control, it felt like protection. A few seconds passed, then the distant sounds shifted again, moving away instead of closer, the tension easing just enough for the room to breathe. Cale remained where he was for a moment, longer before stepping back, the sharp edge in his posture softening slightly. Aaron exhaled slowly, the tightness in his chest easing, but not disappearing entirely. "They will come back," he said. Cale nodded once, as if that had always been the expectation. "Then I will still be here," he replied. Aaron looked at him, really looked this time, searching for hesitation, for doubt, for anything that suggested this was temporary, but found none. "You do not belong here," Aaron said again, quieter. Now, Cale held his gaze, steady, unwavering. "Then I will make it simple," he said. "I am not leaving." The words settled into the space between them, final in a way that made arguing feel pointless, and for a moment, Aaron did not know what to say. He turned away instead, returning to the table, but his hands were slower now, more aware, as if every movement carried weight it had not before. Behind him, Cale remained standing near the door, a quiet, constant presence, and the distance between them, though unchanged, no longer felt like separation. Outside, the forest shifted, but inside, something had already decided to stay. The forest softened as night deepened, the sounds thinning into a quiet rhythm that felt almost deliberate, and Aaron stepped out onto the small porch without thinking, drawn by the way the sky had opened above the trees, the dark canopy breaking just enough to reveal scattered stars that shimmered faintly in the distance. He rested his hand against the wooden railing, breathing in the cool air, letting it steady him in a way the cabin could not. And for a moment, everything felt still, behind him. The door creaked open, and he did not need to turn to know it was Cale. The shift in the air enough to make that clear. The presence familiar now in a way that should not have been possible after so little time. "You should be resting," Aaron said quietly. Cale stepped out beside him instead of answering, his gaze lifting toward the sky, taking in the same scattered light before settling back on Aaron. "You should not be out here alone," he replied. Aaron let out a faint breath that might have been a laugh, though it carried no real humor. "I have always been alone out here," he said. Cale's expression did not change, but something in his eyes did, something that lingered a second longer than necessary. "Not tonight," he said. and the words settled into the space between them with a weight that felt both simple and undeniable. The forest shifted again, softer this time, and small flickers of light began to appear between the trees, faint at first, then clearer, drifting slowly through the air like something out of reach. Aaron watched them without speaking, his shoulders easing slightly. "They come out when the forest feels safe," he said. Cale followed his gaze, observing the gentle movement of the lights, his posture no longer guarded but not entirely relaxed either, as if he was learning something new and had not yet decided what to do with it. "Do you ever leave this place?" Cale asked after a moment. Aaron shook his head, eyes still on the drifting lights. "There is nowhere else that would have me," he said simply. Cale's jaw tightened just slightly, the reaction subtle but present, and without thinking, he stepped closer, the distance between them narrowing until the warmth in the air became unmistakable. Aaron felt it immediately, the shift in pheromones, not overwhelming, not forced, but steady and unmistakable, like something that had been waiting to surface. He did not step away, though instinct told him he should, and that alone was enough to make his breath catch. Cale's hand moved before he fully registered the decision, his fingers brushing lightly against Aaron's, testing, giving him the chance to pull back. Aaron's gaze flickered down to the contact, then back up, meeting Cale's eyes, and for a second, neither of them spoke. "This is not a good idea," Aaron said softly. Though his voice lacked conviction, Cale's grip shifted, not tighter, just more certain. "Then tell me to stop," he said. Aaron hesitated. The answer caught somewhere between what he knew and what he felt, but the words did not come, and the silence that followed said more than anything else could have. Cale closed the distance completely then, his hands settling around Aaron's, steady, grounding, and the connection sent a quiet ripple through both of them, something deeper than simple touch, something that settled into place without asking for permission. The air warmed around them, their scents blending more clearly now, no longer separate, no longer cautious, but intertwined in a way that felt natural, inevitable. Aaron exhaled slowly, his shoulders lowering as if the tension he had carried for years had finally found somewhere to go. And when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "If they find out," he began. Cale did not let him finish, his gaze steady, unwavering. "They will not," he said. Aaron shook his head slightly, a small, almost helpless motion. "You do not understand," he said, but the protest felt weaker now, less certain. Cale stepped closer still, until there was no distance left to close, his presence no longer just near but surrounding, steady in a way that made everything else feel distant. "Then I do not need to," Cale replied quietly. "I only need to know this feels right." The words settled between them, simple and direct, and something in Aaron's expression shifted, the hesitation fading just enough to reveal what had been there all along. He looked at Cale fully then, no longer avoiding, no longer stepping back, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just that, shared breath, shared space, shared awareness. The bond formed not in a sudden surge, but in a quiet alignment, their pheromones weaving together in a way that felt less like something new and more like something remembered, something that had always been waiting beneath the surface. Aaron's fingers tightened slightly around Cale's, the smallest confirmation, and Cale responded without hesitation, his hold steady, certain, as if he had already decided this was not something he would let go of. The forest around them continued to glow softly, the drifting lights moving slowly through the air, but neither of them noticed anymore, not when the silence between them had become something full, something real. "Just tonight," Aaron said finally, though the words felt more like a question than a boundary. Cale did not look away. "Just tonight," he echoed, but the certainty in his voice made it sound like something that would not end with the morning. And for the first time since the forest had closed around him, Aaron allowed himself to believe it, if only for a moment. The morning came too quickly, pale light filtering through the trees as if the forest itself was reluctant to let the night end, and Cale stood at the edge of the clearing longer than he should have, his gaze fixed on the cabin behind him, on the figure standing quietly in the doorway. Aaron did not step forward, did not ask him to stay, but the silence between them carried something heavier than words, something neither of them could undo. "I will come back," Cale said finally, the promise. Simple but certain. Aaron held his gaze, searching for doubt and finding none, and that was what made him look away first. "Do not," he replied softly, though his voice did not carry the strength it once had. Kale did not argue, but he did not take the words as truth either, and when he turned and stepped back into the forest, something in him had already decided that distance would not change what had begun. He returned to a world that felt colder than before. The halls of his family estate vast and silent, built from stone that held no warmth, no memory of laughter, and as he walked through them, every step felt out of place, like he had left something essential behind. The servants bowed as he passed, the air heavy with expectation, but Kale barely acknowledged them, his thoughts elsewhere, drawn back to a quiet cabin hidden deep in a forest no one else dared to enter. Days passed, then weeks, and each time he left, it was with purpose, with the same quiet certainty, returning again and again to the one place that felt real, to the one person who never asked him to stay but never turned him away. Their meetings were brief at first, cautious, hidden within the rhythm of the forest, but the distance between visits shortened, the hesitation faded, and what began as something fragile became something steady, something neither of them tried to name. Kale would arrive without warning, and Aaron would pretend not to expect him, though the small changes in his routine said otherwise. The extra firewood, the herbs prepared, the door left unlocked just a little longer. They spoke less with words and more with presence, shared silence replacing uncertainty, shared breath replacing distance. And in those moments, the world beyond the forest ceased to matter, but the world had never truly stopped watching. The first sign came in the form of a question, quiet but pointed, asked at a long table beneath cold chandeliers. "You have been absent," one of the elders said, his voice calm but carrying weight. Kale did not look up from his place. "I have been where I needed to be," he replied. The room stilled, the silence that followed sharper than before. "You forget yourself," another voice added, softer but more dangerous. Kale's gaze lifted then, steady, unyielding. "I forget nothing," he said, but they had already seen enough. The next time Kale returned to the forest, the air felt wrong before he even reached the clearing, the quiet too complete, the shadows too still, and when the cabin came into view, the door was open, the interior empty. For a moment, everything inside him stilled, then sharpened all at once. "Aaron," he called, his voice cutting through the silence. But there was no answer. He stepped inside, scanning the space, the small details out of place, the herbs scattered, the air carrying a faint trace of something unfamiliar. Behind him, the forest shifted, not with wind, but with presence, and when Kale turned, they were already there, figures stepping out from between the trees, calm, controlled, as if they had always known this moment would come. "You should not have returned," the elders said, his expression unreadable. Kale's posture hardened, his presence pressing outward without restraint. "Where is he?" he asked. The question was not loud, but it carried enough weight to make the air tighten. "Safe," the elder replied, though the word felt wrong the moment it was spoken. Kale's gaze darkened. "That is not an answer," he said. The elder studied him for a moment, then gestured slightly, and the others stepped aside. Aaron stood between them, restrained not by force, but by the quiet pressure of expectation. His expression pale but steady, their eyes met, and in that instant, everything else faded. Kale took a step forward, but the elder's voice cut through the moment. "No further," he said. Kale did not stop, not immediately, and for a second, it looked like he might ignore the command entirely. But then Aaron shook his head, just once, a small movement that carried more meaning than any words. Kale stilled. "He does not belong here," the elder continued, his gaze shifting to Aaron with open disdain, "an omega of no standing, living like this, practicing things that should not exist." Kale's jaw tightened. "He saved my life," he said. The elder dismissed it with a slight motion. "And now he has taken something far more dangerous," he replied. Kale did not respond, because he already knew what they meant. "You will choose," the elder said, his voice calm, absolute. "Forget him, and he will be released, or refuse, and he will not leave this forest again." The words settled heavily, final in a way that left no room for negotiation. Kale's gaze flickered to Aaron, searching, and for the first time, uncertainty crossed his expression. Aaron met his eyes, something quiet and resolute there, something that said, "Do not choose me," even as everything in him hoped. The opposite, the silence stretched, And then Kale spoke, his voice low, steady. If I forget, he walks away, he said. Yes, the elder replied. Kale did not hesitate after that, not outwardly, though something inside him resisted, something deeper than logic, deeper than duty, but he forced it down, because the alternative was worse. Then do it, he said. Aaron's breath caught. The sound small but sharp enough to cut through the moment, and Kale looked at him one last time, as if trying to memorize something he could not name. The vial was placed in his hand, cool, final, and Kale did not hesitate again. He drank. The effect was not immediate, but it came quickly enough, a dull pressure building behind his eyes, memories slipping just out of reach, the edges blurring. For a moment, he saw Aaron clearly, felt everything, and then it began to fade. You promised, Kale said, his voice tightening slightly. Though he could not explain why, the elder inclined his head. And we will honor it, he replied. But the moment Kale's gaze lost its focus, the shift was immediate. Remove him, the elder said quietly. Aaron's eyes widened, the realization hitting too late, and before he could react, the pressure around him tightened, not violent, but absolute. Kale stood still, his expression emptying, the confusion settling in as the last traces of something important slipped away. Aaron did not call out to him, did not reach for him, because he already knew it would not matter. The forest swallowed him again as he was forced away, the path unclear, the air heavy with something he could not fight. He ran when he could, stumbled when he could not, the world narrowing to instinct and survival, deeper and deeper into the forest, past the places he knew, into the parts no one ever returned from. When he finally stopped, it was because there was nowhere left to go, the trees older here, the air thicker, the silence absolute. If you want to live, a voice said, not heard but felt, ancient and steady. You will not leave. Aaron closed his eyes, his breath unsteady but his resolve clear. Then I will stay, he said. The forest shifted around him, not welcoming, but accepting. And something unseen settled into place, a quiet agreement that bound him there. The price came with it, immediate and unyielding, a certainty that he would never cross the boundary again, never return to the world beyond the trees. Aaron opened his eyes, the last trace of the life he had known slipping away, and though he did not look back, he felt it, the weight of something lost, something that would never return the same. Far beyond the forest, Kale stood among stone and silence, a name lingering on the edge of his thoughts, something important, something he could not reach, and for the first time in his life, he did not understand why something was missing. Aaron woke to the soft scratching at the wooden step just outside his door, a familiar sound now, steady and patient, and when he pushed himself upright, one hand instinctively resting over his abdomen before his thoughts fully formed, he already knew what he would find waiting. The fox was there again, its russet fur catching the early light, a cluster of dark wild berries set neatly beside its paws. And for a moment Aaron simply stood in the doorway, watching it the way one watches something that once felt distant and now felt quietly constant. You came back, he murmured, his voice still rough with sleep, and the fox flicked its tail once before stepping back, not retreating, just giving space, the same way it always did. He crouched slowly, picking up the berries, his fingers brushing lightly against the animal's fur as it passed, and the contact brought with it a memory he did not need to search for. The image of that same fox weeks ago, limping, trembling, its front leg caught in something sharp, its body tense. With fear, he had not thought then, only moved, hands steady as he cleaned the wound, as he pressed herbs against torn skin until the trembling eased, until the fox had stopped trying to escape. Now it returned without fear, and that, more than anything, made the silence of the forest feel less empty. Behind him, the garden stretched wider than it had the day before, rows of lavender blooming in soft purple clusters, chamomile opening pale and delicate, and the stubborn mint spreading wherever it pleased along the edges. Aaron stepped into the soil barefoot, the cool earth grounding beneath him as he moved between the plants, fingers brushing leaves, feeling the faint warmth push back in response. You are slower. A bright voice chimed near his ear, and a small flicker of light darted past his shoulder before circling back, restless and impossible to ignore. I am not. Aaron replied automatically, though his movements betrayed him. Slower, more careful, each breath measured. Another glow drifted closer, softer, lingering near his wrist before dipping lower toward his abdomen. Its presence gentler, observant. They are strong, it said quietly. Aaron exhaled, his hand pressing more firmly where the movement beneath had grown impossible to ignore, no longer faint, no longer uncertain, but distinct, three separate rhythms that did not align, that demanded space within him in ways his body struggled to meet. He moved through the garden anyway, trimming stems, gathering leaves. Though he paused more often now, the world tilting slightly when he rose too quickly. Beyond the clearing, the small stream ran clear, its surface catching the morning light, and when he approached, a white-spotted deer stood at the opposite bank, still and watchful. It did not run when he stepped closer, only shifted its weight slightly, as if remembering, and Aaron remembered too, the faint outline of rope cutting into its leg, the way it had thrashed until exhaustion took it, and how he had knelt there in the mud, working quietly, patiently, until the tension left its body and it no longer saw him as something to fear. Now it remained, not close, but present, a silent acknowledgement that needed no words. Aaron knelt at the water's edge, rinsing his hands, watching the ripples spread outward, and for a moment the reflection looking back at him felt incomplete, as if there should have been someone standing just behind him, close enough to feel, impossible to see. His breath caught, sharp and sudden, and his hand tightened instinctively over his abdomen. "Do not," he said under his breath, more firmly this time, forcing the thought away before it could take shape. The lights, hovering nearby, stilled for a fraction of a second, then resumed their slow movement, as if they understood the boundary he was trying to draw. "He is gone," Aaron added, quieter now, the words not entirely true but necessary all the same. No voice contradicted him, and the silence that followed felt like something he could hold on to. The day passed in small, steady tasks. The fox returning once more in the afternoon only to watch him work, a pair of small birds settling on the edge of the garden, unafraid, their heads tilting as if studying him, and once, one hopped closer, pecking lightly at the soil near his hand before darting away again, guiding his attention to a cluster of roots he had nearly missed. Even the smallest things here seemed to move with intention, as if the forest itself had decided he was no longer an outsider. Yet when evening came and he set the food he had gathered onto the table, his hands moved without thought, placing two portions instead of one, and he did not realize until he turned back and saw the empty space across from him. His breath stilled, the moment stretching longer than it should have, and slowly, carefully, he removed the extra portion, setting it aside without a word. "You forget," the restless light teased, circling faster now. "I do not," Aaron answered, though the certainty was thinner this time. "You remember," the softer one corrected, hovering closer. And Aaron did not argue. Night settled gently over the clearing, the air, cooling as the first fireflies appeared, drifting between the trees in soft, wandering paths, their glow steady and warm. Aaron sat on the steps of the small house, the fox curled not far from him, the deer visible just beyond the shadows, the birds quiet in the branches above, and the lights gathering closer than before, their presence no longer distant but familiar. His hand rested over his abdomen as the movement beneath grew stronger, clearer, three distinct pulses that refused to blend into one. He drew in a slow breath, letting himself feel it fully this time. "3," the restless voice whispered, darting close before pulling back. "3 lives," the softer one confirmed, settling near his hand, its glow deepening just enough to illuminate the curve beneath his palm. Aaron's fingers tightened, his gaze lowering as if he could see through to what lay beneath. "3," he repeated, steadier now, no longer questioning. The forest seemed to respond in its own way, leaves shifting though no wind passed, the stream continuing its quiet song, the animals remaining where they were, not leaving, not retreating. Aaron sat surrounded by them, by the garden he now tended, by the creatures he had once helped and who now remained, and by the small lives within him that had become his entire world. And for the first time since everything had been taken from him, the emptiness inside did not feel endless. He lifted his gaze toward the dim stars above the canopy, his breath leaving him slowly. "I will stay," he said softly, not because he had no choice, but because there was something here worth holding on to, something that did not ask him to look back. The lights drifted closer once more, circling him in quiet agreement before scattering back into the trees, and the night settled around him, not as silence to endure, but as a place that had finally, undeniably, become his. Aaron knew the exact moment his body began to give up on him, because it was the first time his hand trembled when it rested over his abdomen, not from fear, but from a weakness he could not steady. The forest was still alive around him, lavender blooming, chamomile opening, mint spreading with quiet insistence, yet the world no longer moved at his pace. It moved around him, past him, as if he had already begun to fall behind. He tried to stand that morning and failed, his knees hitting the wooden step harder than he expected, the breath leaving his lungs in a sharp, unsteady rush, and for a second, just 1 second, his vision went dark at the edges. The fox was there before he could recover, closer than it had ever come, its warm body pressing just enough against his leg to ground him, while the deer stepped fully into the clearing, no longer watching from afar, its stillness alert, protective. "You are breaking," the restless light said, no teasing left in its voice, only sharp, uneasy truth. Aaron swallowed, forcing his breath back into rhythm, his hand already pressing harder against his abdomen where the movement beneath had become overwhelming, not gentle, not separate, but 3 distinct lives pushing outward, stretching him thin from the inside. "I am still here," he said, but even to himself, it sounded like a promise he might not be able to keep. The softer light drifted lower, hovering just above his hand, its glow dimmer than before, as if weighed down by what it felt. "They are not slowing," it whispered. Aaron closed his eyes, his fingers tightening as another wave of strain moved through him, deeper this time, pulling something from him he could not replace. He tried to stand again and nearly fell, catching himself against the wood with a sharp breath, his chest tightening in a way that made each inhale shallow, incomplete. "You will not survive this." The voice came, no longer distant, no longer patient, but present, undeniable, filling the space around him without sound. Aaron did not look up, did not search for it, because he already knew it was everywhere. "I will," he answered, but the words broke halfway through, his voice catching in a way it never had before. The forest stilled, not gently, but completely, the wind gone, the leaves frozen, the stream quieted until only a faint murmur remained. "You were given life," the voice said, steady, unyielding, "not a choice that will end it." Aaron's head lowered, his breath uneven, his body trembling under a weight that was no longer just physical. For the first time, his hand slipped slightly from its place, his fingers loosening just enough for doubt to press in, sharp and sudden. His chest tightened, his breath stuttered, and a single thought forced its way through him, uninvited and unbearable. What if he could not hold them? His fingers curled back immediately, pressing down harder, as if to erase the thought the moment it appeared, his breath shaking as he forced it away. "No," he said, not to the forest, not to the voice, but to himself. The stillness deepened. "One," the voice said at last. Aaron froze, every part of him going still except for the 3 relentless pulses beneath his hand. "You may keep one," it continued, calm and absolute. "And you will live." The words did not echo, did not need to. They settled into him with a certainty that left no space for denial. Aaron's throat tightened, his hand pressing down harder, as if he could hold all 3 lives together through sheer will alone. "No," he said again, this time stronger, the refusal cutting through the silence. "You will not endure all 3. The voice replied, unchanged. Aaron shook his head slowly, once, then again, his breath uneven but his gaze steady now, something fierce burning through the exhaustion. "Then I will not endure," he said, his voice low but unbreakable. The restless light flickered violently, darting closer, its glow unstable. "You will disappear," it whispered, fear replacing its usual brightness. Aaron lowered himself to the ground fully this time, his strength gone from his legs, but his hand never leaving its place. His fingers curved protectively over what he refused to abandon. "Then I will disappear with them," he said, and there was no hesitation, no fear left, only certainty. The forest did not answer, but it did not turn away. Time lost meaning after that, hours stretching into something shapeless. Aaron no longer moving beyond the small space near the house, his energy spent entirely on holding on breathing through the tightening in his chest, through the strain that pulled at him from the inside. He spoke without realizing it, words breaking apart into fragments, repeating until they became something else entirely. Please, just let them live. Take anything, just not them. His voice cracked, softer each time, thinner, until it was barely more than breath. The fox stayed pressed near him, unmoving through the long stretch of fading light. The deer standing guard at the edge of the clearing, and the small lights gathered closer than ever before, their glow dim, quiet, no longer playful, no longer distant. Days passed, or perhaps only one. Aaron could no longer tell. Only that his body was failing him, his breath shallow, his strength slipping further with each moment. Yet the 3 pulses beneath his hand remained strong, steady, refusing to fade. You persist. The voice returned at last, softer now, not testing, not commanding, but something else, something closer to acknowledgement. Aaron did not open his eyes, his hand still pressed where it had remained through everything. I will not choose, he said, the words barely audible but absolute. The silence that followed changed, not heavy, not waiting, but deep, as if something within the forest itself had shifted. When the voice came again, it was quieter, but no less certain. There is a way. Aaron's eyes opened slowly, exhaustion weighing down every movement, but a fragile flicker of something returning. The air shifted, and from the stillness, something revealed itself, not appearing so much as uncovering what had always been there. A small stone resting just above the ground, no larger than his palm, its surface smooth, its center holding a faint glow that pulsed in 3 uneven rhythms, mirroring the lives within him. Take it, the voice said. Aaron reached for it with effort, his hand shaking as his fingers closed around the stone, and the moment he touched it, the warmth surged through him, sharp and overwhelming, not gentle, not kind, but powerful, forcing its way into every empty space within him. His body reacted instantly, his breath catching hard, his muscles tightening as the force pressed through him, stretching him from the inside. Too much, too fast, it will bind them to you. The voice continued, steady, all 3. Aaron's grip tightened, his body trembling as the 3 pulses beneath his other hand surged in response, stronger, anchored. But, the voice said, and the word alone was enough to freeze him. Aaron forced his eyes open, his breath uneven. What will it take? He asked, though part of him already knew. Your years, the forest answered, calm and absolute. 30 of them. The weight of it settled instantly, final, unchangeable. For a moment, everything in him stilled, the pain, the strain, the fear, all of it held in a single point of decision. Then his gaze dropped to the faint glow within his hand, then to the 3 steady pulses beneath his other hand, alive, fighting, existing. His breath shook once, just once, and then steadied. Take them, he said, without hesitation, without regret. The forest fell silent, as if marking the moment, and then the force surged again, stronger than before, no longer something he could contain, but something that demanded everything from him. His back arched slightly as the strain pulled through him, his breath breaking into sharp, uneven bursts as the pressure built, stretching him to a point that felt impossible to endure. His hand pressed harder against his abdomen, anchoring himself, refusing to let go as the pain crested and held, then slowly began to settle. The glow within the stone flared once, then dimmed, and the force within him shifted, no longer tearing him apart, but holding steady, binding what had been pulling him beyond his limits. When it ended, Aaron collapsed back against the wooden step, his body heavy, drained, but no longer slipping away. His breaths came slow, uneven, but they came, and beneath his hand, the 3 pulses remained, steady, alive, still there. His fingers loosened slightly, resting instead of gripping, and for the first time since the choice had been forced upon him, he allowed his eyes to close, not in surrender, but in quiet, fragile relief, knowing that what he had refused to abandon had not been taken from him, no matter what it had cost. Beyond the edge of the forbidden forest, where the trees thinned and the air lost its quiet, watchful weight, the world returned to order, measured steps, controlled voices, a life that moved exactly as it should. And yet, even there, something had begun to unravel. It began with Kale, not in a moment anyone could point to, but in the way the air reacted when he entered a room, the way conversations shortened, the way silence did not settle but tightened, as if something unseen had shifted just out of reach. He only needs the right omega. The elders had said it first, confident, certain, as if the solution was simple, inevitable, and so they arranged it carefully, precisely, as they always had. The first omega was chosen for balance, calm, someone whose presence should have softened any imbalance. And the room was prepared with exact distance, exact control. Every detail placed to ensure success. Kale stood where he was told, unmoving, composed, his expression unreadable. But the moment the Omega stepped across the threshold, something changed. It was subtle at first, a faint pressure forming in the air, like the beginning of a storm too quiet to see, but impossible not to feel. The Omega slowed, just slightly, their breath catching as if the air had grown heavier without warning. Kale did not move, did not speak, but the pressure expanded outward. From him, steady, unavoidable, filling the space between them. One step closer and the Omega's shoulders tensed, confusion flickering across their face before it sharpened into something clearer, something closer to fear. "I cannot," they said, the words unsteady, and then they stepped back. Once, twice, retreating completely before turning away without waiting for permission. The room fell into silence, not shocked, not surprised, but heavier than before. They tried again, another Omega, then another, each attempt more cautious, more controlled, and each one ending the same way. The air tightening, the space shrinking, the distance forced wider no matter how carefully it was arranged. Kale never reacted outwardly, never raised his voice, never reached out. Yet they all left. By the third attempt, even the elders no longer spoke with certainty. The whispers began soon after, first within the estate, then beyond it, carried quietly but spreading quickly. An alpha whose pheromones had become unapproachable, whose presence alone drove others away, who could not be bonded, could not be matched. Kale heard them without listening, because they followed him, settling into the spaces he occupied like a second shadow. At night, the silence changed. Sleep came in fragments, shallow, incomplete, and when it held him long enough, it brought something worse. A figure that never fully formed, standing just beyond clarity, an outline that refused to stay still, and yet felt unmistakably familiar. Sometimes there was a voice, not in words, but in presence, something that lingered just out of reach, and once, just once, his hand lifted in his sleep as if reaching for something that should have been there. When he woke, it remained suspended for a moment before lowering slowly, his chest tightening in a way that had no cause, no explanation. The feeling did not fade with the dream. It stayed, sharp and hollow, like something had been removed from him with intention. Why does this feel like loss, when I remember nothing? The thought came once, uninvited, and did not leave. He rose from his bed that night and did not return to it, choosing instead the training grounds where exhaustion could replace thought. He pushed his body harder than before, faster, longer, until the strain in his muscles drowned out everything else, until the ache became something he could control, something that belonged to him. But even there, control slipped in moments he did not choose. The air shifted, pressure building without warning, subtle at first, then enough to force distance, enough to make those nearby step back instinctively. Once, a metal cup left on the edge of a table trembled, then fell with a sharp sound that echoed too loudly in the quiet. Kale stilled, his gaze lowering briefly to where it had landed before lifting again, expression unchanged. "This is not natural," one of the elders said later, voice low, careful. "It is the aftermath," another replied, sharper now, less certain than before. They brought a physician soon after, someone who understood the body in ways they did not. And Kale stood through the examination without resistance, silent as questions were asked around him rather than to him. "There is no illness," the physician said at last, "only imbalance." "Explain," the elders demanded. The physician hesitated, then spoke more carefully. What was removed was not removed cleanly. The body remembers what the mind does not. His pheromones are rejecting anything that does not align with what was lost. The room fell silent. No one argued. No one corrected him. The attempt stopped after that, not out of mercy, but because there was nothing left to try. The whispers changed, softer now, edged with something heavier than fear, regret. Kale did not acknowledge it, but he did not need to. The distance around him grew naturally, no longer enforced, simply understood. People did not approach unless necessary, did not linger, did not try. He accepted it without resistance, because it matched something already present within him, a space that remained unfilled, constant, unrelenting. And yet, it did not weaken him. It refined him. He became quieter, more precise, more controlled, his movements sharper, his presence heavier, until even the elders shifted without speaking it aloud, no longer directing him, but deferring decisions, moved through him instead of around him. And by the time it was recognized, it was already complete. Kale no longer stood beneath the authority of the family. He stood at its center, stronger, colder, unreachable, alone, and still, beneath all of it, the same pull remained, faint but persistent, like something calling from beyond a distance he could not cross, something that had not disappeared, only been hidden. He did not understand it, did not chase it, but he did not ignore it either. Because for the first time since the silence had settled into him, it did not feel like emptiness. It felt like something waiting to be found. 5 years later, the forest had long since been named something no one approached without reason, a place whispered about rather than spoken of directly, its edges marked not by walls but by absence, the way paths curved away from it as if guided by instinct. Kale had never intended to step toward it, not at first, but the incident that brought him there was small, almost trivial. A patrol report of unusual movement near the border, livestock unsettled, tracks that appeared and vanished. Without pattern, it should have been assigned to someone else, and yet when the words reached him, something in his chest tightened, not pain, not fear, but recognition without memory. He went himself. The moment he crossed into the outer edge of the forest, the air changed. It was not heavier, not hostile, but different, aware in a way that made the rest of the world feel dull in comparison. His steps slowed without his permission, his breath shifting into a quieter rhythm, as if something deeper than thought was guiding him. There was no voice, not truly, but there was direction, a pull that did not force, only insisted, leading him forward through the trees. He followed without realizing he had made the decision. The deeper he went, the stronger it became, not overwhelming, but constant, like something waiting just beyond reach. And then, without warning, it stopped. The path ahead blurred, not physically, but in a way his senses refused to accept, as if the forest itself had drawn a line he could not cross. Kale stood there for a long moment, unmoving, the pull still present but held just out of reach, like a hand that would not yet close around his. His jaw tightened slightly, his gaze fixed ahead, but after a moment, he turned, not in defeat, but in recognition. Whatever was there was not ready to be found. He left the forest the same way he entered, quietly, but the silence outside felt wrong now. Thinner, incomplete. That night, sleep came faster than it had in years, but it did not bring rest. The dream returned, clearer than before, the outline no longer distant, the presence no longer faint. An Omega stood before him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of their breath, but the face remained just beyond focus, shifting whenever he tried to see it. His hand lifted again, just as it had before, but this time it did not stop midway. It reached forward, almost touching, and the moment his fingers should have made contact, he woke. The absence hit harder than before, sharp, immediate, like something had been pulled away at the exact moment it should have been within reach. He sat upright, his breath steady but shallow, his hand still raised in the dark. He lowered it slowly, his gaze distant. The pull remained, stronger. Now, it did not fade with the morning. It followed him through the day, through every movement, quiet but persistent. And this time, he did not ignore it. Deep within the forest, far beyond where Kale had been forced to stop, life moved in a completely different rhythm. The small wooden house stood as it always had, surrounded by a garden that no longer needed guidance to grow, lavender thick and wild, mint spreading freely, chamomile blooming in soft clusters, and laughter, something that had not existed there before, now filled the space between the trees. "You are too slow," a bright voice called out as a small figure darted past the garden. Quick, light, impossible to catch. That was Aaron, the eldest by minutes but convinced it meant everything. A boy with dark hair that never stayed in place and eyes too sharp for someone so young. Always moving, always reaching for something just beyond where he was told to stop. Behind him, a second child followed more slowly, careful, deliberate, her steps measured even as she tried to keep up. Leora, quiet where Erin was loud, her pale hair catching the light, her gaze softer but no less aware, noticing things others missed, her hand brushing against the leaves as she passed, the plants bending slightly toward her touch as if responding. "Do not run so far," she called, her voice gentle but firm. Though she knew he would not listen, the third did not run at all. He stood near the porch, watching, smaller, quieter, his presence easy to overlook until it was not. Kale, the youngest, though only by moments, his expression calm, almost distant, his dark eyes steady as they followed his siblings. Aaron stood just inside the doorway, one hand resting lightly against the frame for support, his body thinner than it should have been, his movements slower, but his gaze warm as it followed them. The cost of 5 years had not left him untouched. The strength he once held had never fully returned, his body carrying a quiet fragility that could not be healed. But he stood there anyway, because they were there. "Aaron," he called softly, and though the boy did not stop immediately, he slowed, just enough to show he had heard. "I am. Not too far," Aaron replied, already moving again. But as he did, something shifted. The air around him flickered, subtle, almost invisible, and the fox that had once stayed near Aaron appeared again at the edge of the clearing, its gaze sharp, its body tense. Aaron paused, tilting his head slightly. "I know," he said, though no one had spoken. He stepped back without argument, something unseen guiding him. Leora reached the edge of the garden and knelt beside a small bird that had landed awkwardly among the leaves. She did not rush, did not startle it, only extended her hand slowly, her fingers brushing lightly against its wing. The bird stilled, then relaxed, its feathers settling as if soothed by her touch. "You will be fine," she whispered, and for a moment, the air around them softened, the tension easing in a way that did not require explanation. Near the porch, Kale remained still, his gaze lifting slightly as if listening to something far beyond the sounds of the clearing. The lights, those small drifting spirits, gathered closer to him than to the others, their glow steady, calm. "They are restless today," he said quietly, not looking at anyone in particular. Aaron's expression shifted slightly, not with concern, but with recognition. Each of them carried something different, something that had begun to show itself more clearly as they grew. Aaron moved like the wind, drawn toward what lay beyond, sensitive to changes no one else noticed. Leora soothed what was broken, her presence gentle but steady, able to calm what others could not. And Kale listened, not with his ears, but with something deeper, something that connected him to the forest itself. "Come back," Aaron called again, softer this time. And this time, all three responded. Aaron returned first, slower than before, Leora guiding the bird back toward the trees before following, and Kale stepping forward last, his gaze lingering just a moment longer on the space beyond the clearing before turning away. They gathered near him, close enough to touch, close enough to feel. Aaron lowered himself carefully onto the step, the effort visible even in the small movement, and the children moved closer. Without being asked, Aaron dropping beside him, Leora settling on his other side, Kale remaining just in front, his presence quiet but unwavering. For a moment, everything stilled, not in silence, but in something fuller, warmer, the kind of stillness that came from being exactly where one belonged, and far beyond the trees, beyond the line that still held Kale at a distance. The same unseen pull tightened, just enough to bring him one step closer to crossing it again. The forest was quieter that morning, not empty, but watchful in a way that made even the smallest sounds feel sharper, clearer, and the three children moved through it with the ease of those who had never known a world beyond it. "Do not go near the edge," Leora reminded softly, her fingers brushing against a cluster of chamomile as she walked, the flowers tilting toward her touch as if listening. "We know," Aaron answered quickly, already a few steps ahead, his attention pulled forward by something only he seemed to notice. "Father said we stay where the trees are thick," Kale added from behind, his voice calm, his gaze drifting not to the path ahead, but to the spaces between, where the small lights lingered just out of sight. Aaron waved a hand without turning back. "I am not going to the edge," he said, though his pace did not slow. The forest shifted around them as it always did, paths opening where they needed to go, closing where they should not, the air guiding more than their own sense of direction. But that day, something was different. Aaron felt it first, a flicker, a movement just beyond the line of his vision. Quick, bright, impossible to ignore. He stopped mid-step, his head tilting slightly. "Do you see that?" he asked, but he did not wait for an answer. Whatever it was moved again, deeper between the trees, just far enough to draw him forward. "Aaron," Leora called, a hint of warning in her voice now. "Do not run." "I am not running," he replied, already moving. He followed the flicker, weaving between trunks, stepping over roots he knew by memory, his breath quick but steady, the pull in front of him stronger than anything behind. The forest did not close the path this time. It did not stop him. It only watched. By the time Leora and Kale realized he had gone too far, the distance between them had already widened. "He went the wrong way," Leora said, her voice tightening. Kale did not answer immediately, his gaze lifting slightly as if listening to something beyond the sounds around them. The lights had shifted, their movement no longer soft, but uneven, unsettled. "The forest is not stopping him," he said quietly. Leora's expression changed, concern sharpening into something more urgent. "Then we bring him back," she said, already moving. Ahead, the trees thinned, not enough to reveal the edge, but enough to change the air, to make it feel less protected, more open, and Aaron slowed, not because he wanted to, but because something in him told him to. The flicker stopped just beyond a narrow line of roots that twisted across the ground like a boundary. Aaron stepped over them without thinking. The moment his foot touched the other side, the air changed. It tightened, not around him, but around something else. Kale stood several yards ahead, his posture rigid, his breath controlled but uneven, as if he had been holding it too long. The forest around him had shifted into resistance, the path behind him blurred, the space in front refusing to open, holding him in place without touching him. He had returned, this time not by accident, not by duty, but because the pull had not left him, because the absence had grown too sharp to ignore. He had stepped deeper than before, farther than the forest had allowed, and now it answered. The air pressed inward, not to harm, but to stop, to hold him exactly where he stood. Kale did not move, his gaze fixed ahead, his jaw set, his control absolute even as the space resisted him. Then something changed. The pressure faltered, not fully, but enough to shift. His senses caught it before his eyes did. A presence entering the space where none should have been able to. He turned. Aaron stood just beyond the line, small, steady, his dark eyes fixed directly on him without hesitation, without fear. For a moment, neither of them moved. The forest held its breath around them. Kale felt it then, the difference. Not in the child, but in himself. The pressure that had forced others away did not rise, did not expand, did not push outward as it always did. It remained still, contained, as if something within him refused to react. Aaron tilted his head slightly, studying him with open curiosity, the way he studied everything new. "You are lost," he said simply, his voice clear, unafraid. Kale did not answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the child, something unfamiliar settling beneath the control. He had never questioned before. The pull shifted again, no longer distant, no longer abstract, but centered, focused, right in front of him. "You should not be here," Kale said at last, his voice low, even, but lacking the weight it carried with others. Aaron took a step closer. The forest did not stop him. The air did not change. Kale did not move back. "You came too far," Aaron replied, as if that explained everything. Behind him, the sound of hurried steps broke through the stillness as Leora and Kale reached the edge of the clearing, their presence immediate, their attention fixed on what stood before them. Leora stopped first, her breath catching as she took in the scene, her instinct pulling her toward her brother even as something deeper told her to remain still. Kale stepped forward more slowly, his gaze not on Kale, but on the space between them, where the air had shifted in a way he had never felt before. "The forest is not pushing him away," he said quietly. Aaron did not look back, his attention still on Kale. "He is not pushing me away," he corrected. The words settled into the space between them, simple, undeniable. Kale felt it fully then, the absence that had defined every encounter before replaced by something else entirely, something steady, something that did not reject or resist. For the first time in years, the space around him was not empty. It was quiet, not the silence he had learned to endure, but something deeper, something that felt dangerously close to recognition. He did not understand it, did not name it, but he did not turn away either. And somewhere beyond the trees, beyond the boundary that had held him back, something that had waited for far too long began, finally, to draw closer. Aaron did not step back. Even when the space between them felt like something that should not be crossed, his gaze steady on Cale with the same open curiosity he gave everything unfamiliar, as if the man standing before him was not something dangerous, not something to fear, but simply new. Cale remained still, watching him in return, aware of every subtle shift in the air that did not come, every instinct that should have pushed the child away but did not respond, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Aaron broke the silence first, tilting his head slightly. "You really are lost," he said again, more certain this time, as if confirming something he had already decided. Cale's gaze did not leave him, but something beneath it shifted, not enough to change his expression, but enough to soften the edge that others never crossed. "This is not a place for you," Cale said quietly, his voice low, controlled, though lacking the weight it once carried. "It is not safe." Aaron blinked once, then glanced around, as if checking the trees themselves before looking back at him. "It is safe," he replied simply. "This is our home." The words settled differently than they should have. Too direct, too certain. Cale's brow lowered slightly, the first visible sign of something beyond control. "Your home?" he repeated, as if testing the meaning, before Aaron could answer. The sound of movement behind him drew both their attention as Leora and Cale stepped into the clearing. Their presence immediate, their focus shifting quickly from Aaron to Cale. Leora's gaze lingered for only a second before she moved closer to her brother, not pulling him away, but standing near enough to reach him if needed, her posture calm but alert. Cale remained a step behind, his eyes not fixed on Cale himself, but on the space between them, where the air had changed in a way he had never felt before. "We told you not to come this far," Leora said softly, though there was no anger in her voice, only concern. "I did not mean to," Aaron replied, though his attention had already returned to Cale. Cale shifted his gaze between the three of them, taking in the differences, the quiet strength in the girl, the stillness in the youngest, the restless energy in the eldest, and something in that contrast felt familiar, though he could not explain why. "You should not be here," he said again, but the words sounded less certain now, as if they no longer carried the same truth. Aaron shook his head lightly. "We live here," he said, gesturing around them. "The forest is ours, and we are its," Leora added, her voice gentle but firm. "The animals watch over us, and the forest does not let harm reach us." Cale's gaze sharpened slightly at that, not in disbelief, but in recognition of something he had already felt, something that made those words difficult to dismiss. "It is still dangerous," he said, though the argument felt weaker the moment he spoke it. Cale tilted his head slightly, his voice quiet but certain. "Not for us." The simplicity of it left no room for doubt. Cale exhaled slowly, his attention shifting for just a moment, and that was when Leora noticed it, the subtle change in the way he stood, the slight tension in his step that did not match the rest of him. Her gaze dropped briefly, then lifted again. "You are hurt," she said, not as a question. Cale followed her line of sight instinctively, his leg stiff where he had not acknowledged it before, a shallow cut along his lower leg where the forest had resisted him, not enough to weaken him, but enough to mark that he had been stopped. "It is nothing," he replied. Automatically, Leora did not argue. She simply stepped closer. Aaron glanced at her, but did not interfere, and Cale remained still, watching. Leora knelt carefully, her movements slow, deliberate, giving him time to refuse, but when he did not move, she reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the wound. The moment her skin made contact, the air around them shifted again, softer this time, calmer, as if something had been soothed. Cale felt it immediately, not as pressure, but as release, the tension easing in a way he had not expected, the shallow pain dulling beneath her touch. His breath paused for just a fraction of a second before settling again. Leora withdrew her hand after a moment, as if nothing unusual had happened. "It will close soon," she said quietly, standing again. Cale looked at her, something unreadable passing through his gaze, something that did not align with anything he had known before. "Thank you," he said, and the words came without calculation. Aaron smiled slightly. as if that had been the expected outcome, while Kale's gaze remained fixed on Kale, thoughtful, distant. Kale reached into the inner fold of his coat, retrieving a small object. Something he carried out of habit more than need. A polished stone set with a faint, natural sheen. Valuable, but not for its worth alone. He held it out, not as a command, but as an offering. Aaron took it first, turning it in his hand, studying the way it caught the light, then passed it to Leora, who examined it more quietly before letting Kale hold it last. For you, Kale said simply. For helping me, Aaron grinned, satisfied. While Leora nodded once in quiet acknowledgement, Kale did not smile, but his fingers tightened slightly around the stone before he handed it back, as if recognizing something deeper within it. Kale accepted it without question, slipping it away again. I need to go further, he said after a moment, his gaze lifting beyond them, toward the deeper part of the forest that had stopped him before. There is something there I need to find. Aaron glanced back in the same direction, then back at him, curiosity sparking again. We can take you, he said quickly. Leora turned to him at once, her expression sharpening. We cannot decide that. Aaron paused, then shrugged slightly. Then we ask. Kale nodded once, as if that had already been understood. Leora looked back at Kale, her voice calm again. We have to ask our father first. The words settled into the space without weight, without intention, just truth. Kale's expression did not change, but something within him stilled, just for a moment. If he agrees, Leora continued, we will bring you. Aaron stepped forward slightly, more certain now. Come back tomorrow. Kale held their gaze for a long moment, then inclined his head once, a quiet acknowledgement rather than agreement. I will return. The forest remained still as he stepped back, not resisting him this time, not holding him in place, only watching as he turned and walked away, the pull no longer distant, no longer uncertain, but clear, defined, and closer than it had ever been before. The next morning came quieter than the one before, as if the forest itself had drawn a breath and chosen to hold it, waiting. Kale returned to the same place without hesitation, the path no longer unfamiliar, the pull guiding him with a certainty that did not need explanation. And when he reached the clearing, the three children were already there, as if they had been expecting him. You came back, Aaron said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice, as though this confirmed something he had already believed. Kale inclined his head slightly, his gaze shifting past them, searching without realizing it. We asked, Leora said before he could speak, her tone calm, measured. Our father said no. The words were gentle, but firm, leaving no space for argument. Kale did not respond immediately, his gaze returning to her, then to Kale, who watched him quietly, and finally to Aaron, who seemed less convinced by the refusal. He does not allow strangers to enter, Leora added, softer now. But he said we could bring you what you need. Aaron brightened slightly at that, as if the compromise was enough. Wait here, he said quickly, already turning before the others could respond. Aaron, Leora called, but he was already moving, and this time, the forest did not stop him. It only shifted, guiding rather than blocking. Kale remained where he stood, his expression unchanged, though something in his posture stilled, more attentive than before. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with small movements, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, and something else, something subtle, watching. From deeper within the forest, Aaron stood just beyond sight, his hand resting lightly against the wooden frame of the house, his breath slower than it should have been. Follow them, he said quietly, not to the children, but to the space around him. The small lights stirred at once, drifting toward the direction Aaron had gone, while the fox lifted its head, ears alert before slipping silently between the trees. Aaron did not move from his place, but his gaze did not waver, tension held carefully beneath his calm. Aaron returned first, a small bundle in his hands, followed more closely by Leora and Kale, who had not let him go alone for long. Food, Aaron said, offering it forward, proud of the solution. Leora extended a small container of water more carefully, and this, Kale accepted both without hesitation, his fingers brushing briefly against theirs, the contact steady, unforced. Thank you, he said again, quieter this time. He ate only a small portion, drank just enough, then set the rest aside as if the act itself had mattered more than the need. I need to go further, he said after a moment, his gaze lifting again toward the unseen depth beyond them. "We told you," Leora replied gently, though there was something softer beneath her firmness now. "We cannot take you." Aaron shifted, restless. "We could try." "No," Leora said, not sharply, but with enough certainty that he stopped. Kale watched them for a moment longer, then reached into his coat, drawing out a small piece of parchment and a writing instrument he carried with him. The movement drew their attention immediately. He wrote quickly, without hesitation, the strokes of his hand precise, controlled, and when he finished, he folded the paper once and extended it toward Leora. "Give this to your father," he said. Leora accepted it carefully, her fingers lingering on the edge of the fold as if sensing its importance. "Will you come back?" Aaron asked before he could stop himself. Kale's gaze met his again, steady. Yes. The word was simple, but it carried something more than promise. The children left soon after, the forest parting for them as it always did, the small lights following at a distance unseen, the fox keeping to the shadows. Kale remained where he was until they disappeared from sight, then turned, not leaving fully, but stepping back just enough to respect the boundary he had been given, deeper within the forest. Aaron felt them before he saw them, the shift in the air, the subtle movement of the lights returning ahead of the children. He stepped forward slowly, his body still carrying the weight of years it had not recovered from, but his gaze steady. Leora approached first, holding out the folded paper. "He gave this to you," she said softly. Aaron took it, his fingers careful, as if the paper itself carried weight. He did not open it immediately. Something in him already knew. When he did, the world narrowed to the space within the lines written there, to the shape of each letter, the precision of each stroke. His breath stopped, not because of what was written, but because of how it was written. The name at the end was enough. Kale. The letters did not blur, did not shift. They remained exactly as they were, undeniable, unchanged. His hand tightened slightly around the paper, his chest rising unevenly for the first time in years. The past did not return gently. It surged, sharp and overwhelming, not in images, but in feeling, in the echo of something that had never truly left him. For a moment, he could not move. Leora's voice reached him first, soft, concerned. "Father." Aaron exhaled slowly, the sound quieter than it should have been, forcing his body back into stillness. "I am fine," he said, though the words came with effort. He folded the paper again, more carefully this time, as if the act itself required control. "You will not take him inside," he added, his voice steady once more. Aaron's shoulders dropped slightly in disappointment, while Leora nodded without question. Kale said nothing, but his gaze lingered on Aaron longer than the others. That night, the forest did not feel the same. Aaron stood outside longer than he needed to, the paper still in his hand, the name still clear even without looking. He told himself it changed nothing. He told himself it could not. But the next day, when the children prepared to return to the clearing, he did not remain behind. He followed, not close enough to be seen, but not far enough to lose sight of them. The forest shifted around him, not stopping him, not guiding him, only allowing. When they reached the edge of the clearing, Kale was already there. He stood as he had before, still, composed, but something in the air around him had changed, sharper, more aware. The children stepped forward first, Aaron speaking before the others could stop him, but Aaron did not hear the words. His focus had already fixed on the figure beyond them. 5 years had not erased him, had not changed him in the ways that mattered. The same posture, the same presence, the same unyielding stillness that had once felt like certainty. Aaron's breath faltered, just once, his hand tightening at his side as if grounding himself against the pull that rose without permission. He had imagined this moment in ways he never allowed himself to finish, and now that it stood before him, real, undeniable, he could not move, not forward, not back. Kale's gaze shifted suddenly, not to the children, but past them, toward the trees where Aaron stood hidden. Something in the air changed, subtle but immediate. The space between them tightened, not with resistance, but with recognition that had no name. "You are not alone," Kale said, his voice low, steady, but directed beyond the 3 in front of him. The words struck deeper than they should have. Aaron's breath stilled. For a moment, the forest seemed to hold everything in place. Then, slowly, without rushing, without breaking the silence that had formed, Aaron stepped forward from the shadows, his figure emerging piece by piece into the light, his gaze steady despite the storm beneath it, until there was no distance left to hide behind. The forest did not move when Aaron stepped out. It only let the truth be seen. Light sliding slowly across his form as he left the shelter of the trees. His posture steady though his body carried a quiet fragility that no longer healed. His gaze fixed on the man ahead with a calm he had spent years building, a calm that now felt dangerously thin. Cale turned fully this time, as if something inside him refused to delay the moment any longer, and when his eyes met Aaron's, something broke. Not outwardly, not visibly, but somewhere deeper, where the emptiness had lived untouched for years. The world narrowed to that single line between them. For a heartbeat, Aaron waited, not for words, not even for recognition, but for anything, anything at all, that would tell him the years had not erased everything. Nothing came. The silence that followed was not empty. It was cruel, final, and Aaron felt it settle into his chest with a weight he had not prepared for. This was it. Then, this was what forgetting truly meant. Cale's expression did not change, but his gaze did not move away either, as if something in him refused to release what it could not understand. "You should not bring strangers this far," Aaron said first. His voice steady, controlled, the same tone he used with the children, but now it carried something sharper beneath it, something that cut even as it remained calm. Cale listened, the words sinking into him without resistance, yet leaving behind something unsettled. This forest is not open to those who do not belong. Aaron held his gaze as he spoke, forcing each word to remain even, though the ache beneath it pressed harder with every second that Cale looked at him like a stranger. Cale tilted, his head slightly, not dismissing, not agreeing, simply trying to understand. "And yet I was allowed here," he said quietly. Aaron's fingers curled faintly at his side, grounding himself against the surge that rose unbidden. Allowed does not mean accepted. The children remained still, Aaron watching with open curiosity, Leora tense but composed, Cale silent, his attention fixed on the space between them where something had begun to shift. Cale stepped half a pace closer without realizing it, drawn not by reason but by something far less explainable. The air did not resist him this time. It softened, and in that moment, the emptiness inside him, so familiar, so constant it had become part of him, shifted. It did not vanish, but something filled it, sudden and overwhelming, like breath returning after being held too long, like a heartbeat restarting after silence. His chest tightened sharply, not in pain, but in something dangerously close to relief. He did not understand it. He did not question it. He only knew he could not turn away. "I am looking for something," he said, though the words felt insufficient now. "Something that is here." Aaron felt the impact of that more than anything. Before it, the echo of truth wrapped in ignorance, and for a moment, his control slipped, just enough for the hurt to surface in his eyes before he forced it down again. "Then you are looking in the wrong place," he replied, quieter now, but no less firm. Cale's gaze sharpened, drawn further in, as if the denial only confirmed what he could not name. "Have we met before?" The question came suddenly, instinctively, and the moment it left him, the space between them tightened. Aaron's breath caught. Just once. But it was enough. The past rose too fast, too close, and he had to hold it back with everything he had left. He had known this question would come. He had told himself he would answer it without hesitation. "No," he said, steady, controlled, and it felt like breaking something all over again. Cale stilled, not convinced, not dismissive, just caught in something that did not resolve. He did not ask again. Instead, he took another slow step forward, the pull stronger now, undeniable. "Then tell me why this place feels like it belongs to me," he said, and this time the certainty in his voice was not forced. It was felt. Aaron closed his eyes briefly, just long enough to steady himself, just long enough to keep from stepping forward when everything in him demanded it. When he opened them again, the calm was back, placed carefully over everything beneath it. "It does not," he said, softer now, almost gentle. "You are only passing through." The gentleness did not reach his eyes. Cale watched him in silence, the feeling in his chest refusing to fade, growing instead, pressing outward in a way that made no sense. And then Aaron spoke again, quieter than before, but sharper than anything he had said. "Do not come back." The words landed like a fracture. Kale did not move at first. Then his breath caught, abruptly, unexpectedly, as something inside him reacted before his mind could understand it. The fullness in his chest twisted into something else, something raw and immediate, and without warning, without reason he could name, his eyes burned. The tears came before he could stop them, one slipping free, then another, silent, unrestrained. He did not understand it. He did not hide it. He only stood there, caught in a reaction that did not belong to logic. Why? He asked, the word low, unsteady in a way nothing else about him had been. Aaron's composure faltered then, not completely, but enough. The sight of it, the rawness, the unguarded confusion, struck deeper than anything else, and for a moment, the wall he had built over 5 years cracked. His voice softened despite himself. Because this place will only hurt you. It was the closest he could come to the truth without breaking it entirely. Kale shook his head once, slow, firm, as if rejecting not the warning, but the distance itself. Then I will return, he said, the steadiness coming back into his voice, even as the last trace of tears remained. I will find my own way in, no matter what it takes. The certainty in it left no room for doubt. Aaron held his gaze for a long moment, the part of him that still remembered, still wanted, rising and colliding with the part that had learned to survive without him. In the end, he did not argue. He did not stop him. He only turned away. Do as you wish, he said, the words quiet, final. He stepped back, the forest shifting with him, opening just enough to take him and the children back into its protection. Aaron hesitated, looking between them as if something important had just happened that he did not understand. Leora followed immediately, though her gaze lingered on Kale a moment longer. Kale was the last to move, his eyes resting on Kale with quiet certainty before he turned. The trees closed behind them, not fully, but enough. Kale remained where he was, the emptiness inside him no longer the same as before, no longer silent, but alive with something he could not ignore. Deeper within the forest, the children did not stay quiet for long. Why can he not come? Aaron asked first, the question direct, insistent. He was not dangerous, Leora added more gently. And he was hurt. Kale said nothing, but his gaze remained on Aaron, waiting. Aaron stopped, turning to face them fully now, the calm back in place. But this time it was firmer, more deliberate. Because not everyone who seems harmless is safe, he said, his voice steady, carrying the weight of something they had not yet experienced. And not every boundary can be crossed just because someone wants to. Aaron frowned, unconvinced, but he was not pushing us away. That does not mean he will not hurt you. Aaron replied, not harshly, but without softness this time. Leora lowered her gaze slightly, still thoughtful. He felt familiar. The word lingered. Aaron's chest tightened again, but his expression did not change. That is exactly why you must be careful, he said quietly. The things that feel the closest are sometimes the ones that take the most from you. The children fell silent at that, not because they fully understood, but because they recognized the finality in his tone. We will not bring him in, Aaron added, and there was no room for compromise in his voice. Aaron opened his mouth as if to argue, then stopped. Leora nodded once, accepting it even if she did not agree. Kale said nothing, but the way his gaze drifted back toward the edge of the forest made it clear the matter was not finished. Aaron turned away again, leading them back toward the house, his steps slower, but steady. Behind them, far beyond where they could see, the forest remained still, and somewhere at its edge, a man who should have forgotten everything stood with a heart that, for the first time in years, refused to be empty again. Kale did not return once. He returned again and again, each attempt quieter but more deliberate than the last, as if the forest had become something he was learning rather than something he was fighting. The first few times it turned him away exactly as before, paths folding back into themselves, the air thickening just enough to blur direction, the ground shifting underfoot until he found himself standing at the edge without remembering when he had begun to retreat. He adjusted, changed routes, slowed his pace, watched the way light moved between the trees, the way silence gathered and broke, and with each return, he went a little further before the forest answered. The resistance was never the same twice, sometimes subtle, sometimes sharp, but always precise, always enough. Branches caught at his sleeves and skin, shallow cuts marking his forearms, then deeper ones along his side. His leg, nothing that would stop him, but nothing he could ignore. He did not stop. Deeper within the forest, the pattern did not go unnoticed. Aaron was always the first to run back, breath quick, eyes bright with something he could not quite name. He came again, he would say, as if it mattered that he had not given up. Leora followed with quieter details, her voice calm but growing softer with each report. He stayed longer this time, and he was hurt more. Kale watched the longest, speaking the least. The forest is testing him, he said once, and after that, he did not repeat it, because he did not need to. Aaron listened to every word without interrupting, his posture still, his expression unchanged, but something inside him shifted with each telling, a tension that did not show but did not fade. He had told Kale not to return. He had meant it, yet each time the children spoke, the certainty he had built began to fracture, quietly, insistently. He fell today, Aaron said one afternoon, the excitement gone from his voice, replaced with something closer to worry. He got back up, but he did not finish. Leora lowered her gaze slightly. He should not be alone out there. Kale's eyes lifted, distant, certain. He will not stop. Aaron's hand tightened briefly at his side before stilling again. The movement small enough that none of them would have noticed if they had not been watching him so closely. And you stayed away, he said, not a question. Leora nodded at once. We did. Aaron hesitated, then nodded too. Kale said nothing, but his silence held the same answer. The days continued, the distance shrinking not in leaps, but in quiet, stubborn inches, until one day, the forest changed its answer. Kale stepped deeper than he had before, further than instinct had ever allowed him. And when the resistance came, he did not yield to it. He moved through it, not forcing, but refusing to retreat. The air pressed harder, the ground unsteady, branches tearing at his coat and skin, the cuts no longer shallow, blood marking his path in uneven lines. His breath grew heavier, uneven, but his focus did not break. He pushed until the world blurred at the edges, until the pull that had guided him here surged stronger than the resistance. And for a single, fragile moment, the forest did not close. He stepped through, deeper than he had ever been. The cost came immediately after. His footing slipped, his body dropping hard to one knee, his hand catching against the earth, the impact sending a sharp jolt through him that he did not try to soften. He stayed there for a moment, his breath unsteady, blood darkening the ground beneath his palm. Then he lifted his head. It was enough. He had crossed. Deeper within the forest, the shift was felt all at once. Kale reacted first, his head lifting sharply. He crossed. The words broke the stillness. Aaron did not hesitate, already moving. We have to go. Leora followed a step behind, her voice controlled but urgent. We promised. He is hurt. Aaron answered, not slowing. The forest did not stop them this time. It parted, not fully, but enough. Aaron felt it the moment they moved. The change in the air, the alignment of the forest slipping just slightly beyond his control. Stop, he said, not loudly. But it did not reach them in time. They had already gone too far. For a moment, he remained where he was, the weight of his own words pressing back against him. The boundary he had held now standing between him and something he could no longer ignore. Then he turned, not toward the children, but toward something older, deeper. The forest responded at once, the light dimming, the air cooling, the presence he had made his pact with stirring in quiet acknowledgement. Aaron stepped forward into that space, his posture lowering slightly, not in weakness, but in respect. You have seen him, he said softly. The answer came in the stillness, in the way the air settled around him. He will not stop, Aaron continued, his voice steady though the tension beneath it had sharpened. And if this continues, you will break him before you turn him away. The silence did not deny it. I asked for this place to protect what I was given, he said, quieter now, not to destroy what returns. The forest held its breath around him, as if considering. Far ahead, Kale forced himself back to his feet, every movement slower now, heavier, his body marked by the path he had taken, but his gaze steady, fixed deeper still. He did not turn back. He would not. Behind him, unseen, 3 small figures moved faster than they ever had before, breaking every rule they had been given, drawn forward by something they did not yet understand. And between them all, the forest stilled, not resisting, not guiding, waiting, because for the first time, since he had stepped into it, the question was no longer whether Kale would return. It was whether the forest would finally let him stay.